When I saw his hands in her room, I knew my daughter would be next. Quiet. Grandma liked it too, he whispered to my little girl. It was at that moment I decided the family patriarch wouldn't live to see another dawn. Hello there. It's so good to have you visit me today. I'm Elizabeth Beth Donovan, but everyone around here calls me Miss Beth. I'm 73 years old, with some wrinkles that tell stories that aren't always pretty to hear, but they're true. I was born in a small town in Kentucky, but now I live here in Port Angeles, Washington, far from where I started my life. The place where I am now isn't exactly a common home, you know. There are gray concrete walls, long corridors, and simple rooms where I meet with the female inmates. I spent almost 20 years of my life in the women's wing of this state prison. It wasn't the end I imagined for myself, but it was the path I chose when I understood that I needed to protect my daughter at all costs. Today, I come back here 3 times a week, no longer as a prisoner, but as a volunteer. Between these walls, I found refuge in books when I was an inmate. Every day, after breakfast served at 6 in the morning, I would take a book from the small library and sit near the window. Natural light was better for the eyes. Today, I'm the one bringing books to the women who still live here. I read everything: novels, poetry, biographies. It's as if each page turns a key that opens a door out of this place. When I have a book in my hands, I'm no longer a white-haired prisoner. I'm an explorer, an adventurer, a free woman. I started reading with such dedication after I arrived here. Before, in the life I had, there was never enough time. I was always taking care of the house, the husband, the children, the appearances, especially the appearances. In that big house, with expensive furniture and paintings on the walls, I only read recipes and shopping lists. Here, between 4 simple walls, I discovered entire worlds in the pages of books. The first story I read in prison was Pride and Prejudice. One of the older guards, Mrs. Margaret, brought me the worn-out book. "It'll do you good, Beth," she said. And it did. I remember crying over those yellowed pages, not because of Elizabeth Bennet's story, but because for the first time in decades, I had chosen something just for myself. A small pleasure that no one could control or take away from me. Today, the other ladies who live here ask me to tell them the stories I read. On Sunday afternoons, we sit in the yard, and I become the prison's storyteller. Funny how life turns out, isn't it? Some of the younger women call me Grandma, and I like that. I am a grandmother. I have 2 grandchildren who never saw me outside of here, but who come to visit me once a month. It's for them that I smile, even when my heart still bleeds with old memories. If you're watching me now, I'd kindly ask you to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel. Each subscription is like a virtual hug I receive, and it helps me continue telling my story. And you, my dear viewers listening to me now, tell me in the comments, from which little town are you watching me? And at what time of day did you find this video? Early morning with coffee, during lunch break, or late at night before bed? I read every comment with great care and feel so happy knowing that, even from in here, I can connect with you out there. Today, I'm going to tell a story that I never told to the newspapers, nor to the judges, nor to the psychologists who visit me here. It's the true story of how a simple woman, who always bowed her head and accepted her place, one day transformed into something no one expected. I'll tell you about the day I realized that even the most fragile of toys can break in a way that cuts deep. My childhood in Kentucky was simple, but full of love. I was born in 1952 in a small wooden house with a dirt floor and a thatched roof. My father, Gerald Donovan, was a quiet man who worked from sunrise to sunset in the tobacco fields. My mother, Amelia Donovan, was the opposite, talkative, cheerful, always humming while washing clothes in the creek or making her baked goods to sell at the fair. I also had my siblings, Sebastian, the oldest, who helped Daddy in the field since he was a boy. Catherine, who was only 2 years older than me and always braided my hair before school. And Evan, the youngest, who was always chasing chickens in the yard. Our house was on the edge of the road, leading to the town center. It wasn't fancy, you see. It was one large room where we all slept, separated by calico curtains that Mama sewed, and a kitchen with a wood-burning stove that made everything smell like sweet hickory smoke. The bathroom was a small wooden cabin at the back of the yard, and we bathed with a dipper, using water drawn from the well. We would wake up with the first rooster crow. Mama was already up, lighting the fire for coffee. We ate corn mush with milk or grits before leaving for our chores. Catherine and I would go to the rural schoolhouse, on foot, about 2 miles down the dirt road that became a mudslide during the rainy season. I remember that on winter mornings in the hills, the grass would be covered with dew and sparkle, as if diamonds were scattered all over. We would play by running our hands through it and getting all wet. At school, Miss Irene taught all grades together in a single room. She was strict, hitting the desk with a ruler when someone talked, but she had a loving way of explaining difficult things. She was the one who taught me to love reading, lending me little storybooks after she noticed I finished my lessons faster than the others. After school, there was no time for laziness. It was helping Mama with household chores, peeling potatoes, feeding the chickens, sweeping the yard. But there was still a little time to play before sunset. My favorite games were jumping rope made of twine, playing house with dolls made from corn husks dressed in scraps, and playing jacks with pebbles we collected from the river. On Sundays, we would get dressed up to go to St. Sebastian's little church, the town's patron saint. Mama would carefully comb my hair, making curls at the ends with water and sugar, and I would wear the only pretty dress I had, kept in a box to avoid getting it dirty. After Mass, it was a day of celebration. We would stroll around the square, eating molasses candy or lollipops when Daddy had some spare change, and watch the clogging performances, a traditional dance in our region. The summer festivals were the highlight of the year. The entire town would be decorated with colorful flags, and the smell of mulled cider, corn on the cob, and cornbread would take over the streets. There would be a big bonfire in front of the church, and we, children, would dance around it, jumping over the smaller embers that scattered. Daddy played fiddle for the square dances, and Mama was famous for her pumpkin cobbler with coconut, which she sold in clay pots. But not everything was rosy in our simple life. When I was 9, a severe drought hit the region. The crops died, the well almost dried up, and we started eating once a day, sometimes just cornmeal with a little grated molasses. I saw Daddy cry hidden behind the barn when he lost almost everything he had planted. That's when he decided we needed to change our lives. At the end of that year, in 1961, we packed our few clothes and left on the back of a flatbed truck headed for Louisville. I remember the bumpy road and Mama holding Evan in her lap, trying to make him sleep while softly singing "Rock-a-bye Baby." There were more than 30 people crammed in the back, all fleeing the same drought, all with the same dream of a better life. In Louisville, we went to live in a shed behind the house of an acquaintance of Daddy's. It was just one room for the 5 of us, but at least it had running water and a bathroom we shared with 3 other families. Daddy got a job as a construction worker's assistant, and Mama took in laundry. We children started attending the public school in the neighborhood, which was larger and had more students than I had ever seen. It was difficult at first, you know. The city children mocked our slow way of talking, our patched clothes, our bare feet because the shoe money only came at the end of the month. Catherine cried every day when she came back from school, but I did things differently. I studied twice as hard to show that a country girl was smart too. Soon, I became known as the best student in the class, and Miss Doris would have me help classmates who had difficulties. As I grew up, life got a little better. Daddy became a foreman, Mama set up a small baked goods stand at the market, and we were able to move to our own little house, small but ours, in a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts. Sebastian was already working in an auto repair shop, and Catherine helped Mama with the baked goods. Even little Evan sold popsicles on the streets on weekends to contribute. At 15, in 1967, I started working part-time as a salesgirl in a fabric store downtown. That's where my life began to change in a way I could never have imagined. The store belonged to a wealthy family in the city, the Millers, who owned several properties and businesses in Louisville. Their youngest son, August, was studying engineering and sometimes stopped by the store to pick up the cash register money at his father's request. The first time I saw August Miller, it was like seeing a movie star. He had a different way of walking, talking, looking, as if the whole world had been made to serve him. He wore clothes that I had only seen in magazines and drove a shiny car that made everyone on the street stop to look. When he greeted me for the first time, I felt my cheeks burn with shame at my simple appearance. I never imagined he would look at me as a woman. I was just the country girl, skinny, with simple braids and a cotton dress. But fate, my dears, has these ironies. What I didn't know at that time was that handsome, educated, and rich young man would be the gateway to the hell I would live years later. And that the real demon wasn't him, but the man who was waiting for me in the Miller mansion, the patriarch of the family, my future father-in-law. It was in September 1970, with my 18 years just completed, that August asked me to be his girlfriend. In those days, a proper girl didn't walk alone with a young man, especially him being from an important family, and me, a simple salesgirl. Mama almost fainted when he appeared at our humble little house, all elegant in a light suit, to ask my father's permission. "Would you do me the honor of allowing me to date your daughter, Mr. Donovan?" he asked, extending his hand to my father, who was embarrassed by the calluses on his own. Daddy looked at me, then at Mama, and nodded, unable to say a word. All the neighbors came out to their doors to see the imported car parked on our dirt street. Gossip spread quickly through the neighborhood. "Elizabeth caught a rich one," they said. "Will it last?" others questioned. I didn't care about the malicious comments. I was in love and felt like I had won the lottery of life. Our courtship was quick, only 8 months. In May 1971, August surprised me with an engagement ring that must have cost more than everything my family owned. In July of the same year, we were married at the Louisville Cathedral in a wedding that made the local newspapers. "Miller heir marries simple girl," said the headline, as if it were a modern fairy tale. My wedding dress was a dream of silk and lace, chosen by August's mother, Mrs. Celeste, an elegant and cold woman who never hid her disappointment with her son's choice. During the wedding preparations, she treated me like a doll that needed to be completely remodeled. She had my hair cut, taught me to use silver utensils, hired an etiquette teacher. "You're going to enter society, dear. You need to learn how to behave," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. But nothing prepared me for what would come next. Nothing prepared me for truly getting to know my father-in-law, Dr. Henry Miller. The first time I entered the Miller mansion as August's fiancée, Dr. Henry welcomed me with a hug that lasted too long, his hands going a little lower than would be appropriate. "Welcome to the family, my dear. August has good taste," he said, looking me up and down in a way that made me feel naked. August didn't notice, or pretended not to notice. Later I would understand that this was the pattern. He always looked the other way, always pretended not to see. After the wedding, we went to live in a house on the same grounds as the main mansion. It was a smaller building, but still luxurious, intended for the family's children who got married. There were 2 other similar houses on the grounds, where August's older brothers lived with their families. The entire complex was surrounded by high walls and guarded by security. "For our protection," my husband said. I didn't know yet that the most efficient prison doesn't need visible bars. In the first weeks of being married, I realized that the family had strange rules. We all dined together in the main mansion every night, without exception. Dr. Henry would sit at the head of the huge table, and everyone would wait in silence until he started eating. No one dared to contradict him, not even on trivial matters. The sons, grown men, would lower their eyes when he spoke louder. Mrs. Celeste, with her pearl necklaces and always impeccably manicured hands, seemed like a statue beside her husband. She smiled politely, agreed with everything, never gave opinions. Only much later would I understand that she had been his first toy, long before me. It was on an afternoon in December, 3 months after the wedding, that Dr. Henry showed who he really was. August had gone on a business trip, and I was alone at home reading a magazine. I heard knocks on the door and, upon opening it, found my father-in-law standing there with a smile that froze my soul. "I came to see how my favorite daughter-in-law is doing," he said, entering without waiting for an invitation. He closed the door behind him and advanced until he was inches from me. "August told me you're trying to give me a grandchild. How's that going?" I retreated, embarrassed by the intimate question. "We're fine, Dr. Henry." "Would you like some coffee?" He laughed, a harsh sound like sandpaper. "I didn't come for coffee, Elizabeth. I came to get to know the new jewel of the Miller family better." What happened next was so fast that I barely had time to react. His hands were on me, his mouth close to my ear. "You're now part of the family's assets, did you know that? And I take very good care of what's mine." I tried to push him away. I screamed, but he was too strong. "No one will hear you, my toy." And even if they did, no one would do anything. Ask my wife, ask my other daughters-in-law. They learned to keep quiet. When it was over, he adjusted his tie as if he had just signed a business contract. "Our little secret, okay? August doesn't need to know. It would be a shame if he found out that his wife isn't as innocent as she seems." That night, when August called to say he would return the next day, I cried on the phone. "I miss you," I lied. What I wanted to say was, "Get me out of here." But the words didn't come out. When my husband returned, I tried to tell him, "Your father, he came here yesterday and—" August interrupted me before I could finish. "Dad told me he stopped by to see if you needed anything. It was very thoughtful of him." I looked at my husband, searching for some sign that he would understand if I continued. But what I saw was a man who had decided long ago not to see anything that might disturb his comfortable life. At that moment, I understood that I was alone. Dr. Henry's visits became frequent, always when August was traveling or working late. "My carnal toy," he called me with that smile I learned to hate. So different from the other daughters-in-law. They're like porcelain dolls, but you have fire, country girl. I learned to hide in my own body during those moments. I closed my eyes and imagined I was back in Kentucky, running through the fields with Catherine, feeling the hill breeze on my face. It was the only way to survive. A year after the wedding, I got pregnant. I didn't know if the baby was August's or I couldn't even think of the other possibility. When I told my husband, he was radiant. When we told the family at dinner, Dr. Henry raised his glass in a toast. "To the continuation of the Miller dynasty," he said, looking directly at me with a possessive gleam in his eyes. During the pregnancy, to my relief, he left me alone. "I don't want to harm my grandson," he explained, as if he were being extremely generous. For the first time since the wedding, I could breathe without fear. My daughter was born in September 1972, a perfect girl whom we named Eliza. When I put her in my arms, I silently promised that I would protect her from everything and everyone, especially from her grandfather. To my surprise, Dr. Henry seemed disappointed with a granddaughter. "Next time, it will be a boy," he declared, as if he could control even that. In the years that followed, I had 2 more children, Julian in 1974 and Robert in 1976. August was increasingly absent, taking over the family business and traveling constantly. I devoted myself to the children and tried to create a protective bubble around us. Dr. Henry continued with his visits, but now I had a strategy. I never stayed alone. I always had a nanny, a maid, or the children nearby. He noticed and smiled, that smile that said, "You can run, but you can't hide forever." In front of others, he was the perfect grandfather, the respected patriarch. He brought expensive gifts for the children, told stories, pretended to be the kindest man in the world. The people in the city admired him, called him a benefactor, applauded his donations to hospitals and schools. Only I saw his true face. Only I knew that behind the philanthropist was a monster. In 1986, when Eliza turned 14, something began to happen that chilled my soul. I noticed how Dr. Henry's eyes followed her during family dinners. I saw how he created opportunities to be alone with her, offering to help with homework or to take her to the mall. My girl, always so smart, instinctively began to avoid him. "I don't like the way Grandpa looks at me," she told me one day, hugging her own body as if she felt cold. "It's as if he were undressing me with his eyes." Those words set off an alarm inside me. The cycle was about to repeat itself. The years between 1986 and 1990 were like living on thin ice. With each step, I felt that everything could crack beneath my feet. My life came down to a single mission: to protect Eliza from her grandfather. I had my 2 boys too, of course, but with them the danger was different. Dr. Henry was molding them in his image, teaching them to see women as he saw them, as property, trophies, toys. With Eliza, I created an invisible protection system. I never let her go to the main mansion alone. I invented illnesses, appointments, anything to keep her away from his clutches. I enrolled her in a boarding school in Virginia when she turned 15, claiming it was better for her education. In truth, it was to keep her away from her grandfather. "Why are you so opposed to Dad?" August asked me one night after I refused to let Eliza spend a weekend at the mansion while we traveled. "He just wants to spend time with his granddaughter." I looked at my husband, that man I once loved and who now seemed like a stranger, and thought about telling the truth. But what truth would that be? That his father had repeatedly violated me over the years? That now he was looking at our daughter with the same hungry eyes? That the whole family knew and kept silent, as in a silent conspiracy? "I don't trust him," was all I managed to say. August laughed, that laugh I learned to hate. "You're getting paranoid, Elizabeth. My father is a respected man. Half of Louisville owes him favors." And it was true. Doctor Henry had judges in his pocket, politicians at his dinner table, sheriffs on his Christmas gift list. Who would believe me against him? In 1990, when Eliza was 18, she returned from boarding school to spend the holidays at home. She was more beautiful than ever, with that perfect mixture of traits from my family and the Miller family. Dark hair like mine, light eyes like her father's. She was a young woman now, no longer a girl. At the first family dinner after her return, I saw Dr. Henry's look when she entered the dining room, a look that I knew all too well. "My favorite granddaughter is back," he said, standing up to hug her. I saw how his hands lingered on her back, how he pulled her too close. I saw the discomfort in her eyes, the way she subtly moved away. During dinner, he made a point of seating Eliza next to him, pushing Mrs. Celeste to the other end of the table. At every moment, he found an excuse to touch her hand, her arm, her shoulder. "Have you thought about which college Eliza will attend?" he asked, looking at August and me. "She wants to study medicine," August replied proudly. "She's already studying for the entrance exams." Dr. Henry smiled that smile that gave me chills. "Medicine? What a wonderful coincidence. I have several contacts at the medical school. I can give her private lessons, prepare her personally." An alarm sounded inside me. "That won't be necessary," I quickly replied. "We've already hired a private tutor." His eyes narrowed for a second, before the smile returned. What a waste of money when there's a doctor in the family willing to help. That night, after dinner, while everyone was talking in the living room, I saw Dr. Henry whisper something in Eliza's ear that made her turn pale. She quickly stood up, saying she needed to go to the bathroom. Without anyone noticing, I followed her. Instead of going to the bathroom, she went out to the garden, breathing rapidly as if trying not to cry. "What happened, darling?" I asked, approaching her. She was startled by my presence, then relaxed. "Nothing, Mom. I just needed some air." What did your grandfather say to you? Eliza hesitated, biting her lip. He said that I've grown into a very beautiful woman, that I have your body when you were young. She crossed her arms over her chest, as if wanting to hide. And that he knows I'll like the private lessons with him, because you liked it when he taught you new things. My blood froze. He said that? Those exact words? She nodded, confused by my reaction. Mom, what's going on? Why do you always get strange around Grandpa? I looked at my daughter, at her innocence that would soon be destroyed if I didn't do something, and made a decision. Eliza, listen carefully. You are not going to be alone with your grandfather. Never. Understood? Never agree to be in a closed place with him. Never accept gifts from him. Never allow him to touch you. Her eyes widened. Why? Is he dangerous? How to explain the inexplicable? How to tell a daughter that her grandfather, the respected patriarch, the benevolent doctor, was a predator? Trust me, darling. Just trust me. In the following weeks, Dr. Henry intensified his attempts to be alone with Eliza. He would show up unexpectedly at our house, offering to take her to bookstores to buy study materials, inventing medical consultations to check her health before college. I thwarted every attempt, becoming her shadow, never leaving her alone. I slept poorly, always alert, fearing he might enter our room during the night. I installed an extra lock on her bedroom door, claiming it was so she could have more privacy. August began to notice my constant vigilance. You're suffocating the girl, he complained. She's not a child anymore, Elizabeth. You don't understand, I replied, exhausted. You never understood. Understand what? This obsession with my father? I took a deep breath, gathering courage. It was time for the truth. Your father, he's not who you think. He touched me, August, many times, when you weren't around. He called me his carnal toy. I expected tears, anger, shock. Instead, I saw something that destroyed me more than any abuse: indifference. Don't be ridiculous, he said, adjusting his tie. My father has always been attentive to you. If there was any misunderstanding, I'm sure it was your imagination. You've always been somewhat fanciful, Elizabeth, with those childhood stories from the country. At that moment, I understood that my husband knew. He always knew. Just as his mother knew, his sisters-in-law knew. It was the Miller family's public secret, passed down from generation to generation like a hereditary disease. A week later, I went to the market with my maid, Mrs. Zoe, the only person I trusted in that house. Eliza stayed to study, with the promise that she would lock the door and not open it for anyone. I returned earlier because I forgot my wallet. When I entered, the house was too quiet. I called for Eliza, but there was no response. A chill ran up my spine. I ran to her room. The door was unlocked. Empty. I searched the whole house, increasingly desperate. That's when I heard a noise coming from the study, a place where Eliza never went. I approached quietly and saw that the door was ajar. What I saw through that crack changed everything. Dr. Henry was there, leaning over my daughter, who was huddled on the couch. One of his hands was under her blouse, the other holding her face with force. Eliza was trying to turn her head, her eyes tightly closed, tears streaming down her face. Quiet, I heard him whisper. Grandma liked it too. It was as if something broke inside me, not a break of fragility, but a break that liberates something wild, primitive. I pushed the door with such force that it hit the wall. Dr. Henry turned, surprised, but not scared. Never scared. After all, who was I to threaten him? Just his carnal toy, the country daughter-in-law, the woman no one would believe. Get away from her, I ordered, my voice firmer than it had ever been in his presence. He smiled, that smile. We're having a private conversation, dear. Why don't you come back later? Mom, Eliza sobbed, running to me as soon as he loosened his grip. I hugged my daughter, feeling her body tremble. Over her head, I looked at my father-in-law, the man who had destroyed my youth and now threatened my daughters. "This ends here," I said, my voice low but loaded with a promise that until then I didn't know I was capable of making. He laughed, straightening his expensive jacket. "Nothing ends unless I want it to, my little toy. Nothing." When he left, Eliza collapsed in my arms, crying convulsively. He said that you knew, that you allowed it, that it was normal in the family." I held her face between my hands. "Look at me, daughter. None of that is true. None of that is normal, and I never, ever allowed it." "Then why do we stay here? Why don't we run away?" The question that I myself had asked 1,000 times in the mirror. Why didn't I run? Why didn't I report him? Why didn't I scream to the world what was happening in that house of perfect appearances? Because no one would believe it. Because he would find us. Because shame paralyzed me. But now it was different. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about Eliza. "We'll run away," I decided at that moment. "Today, I'll get you and your brothers out of here." But I knew, deep in my heart, that running wouldn't be enough. He would find us, like a hunter finds his prey. He would use his money, his power, his connections. There would be no safe place as long as Dr. Henry Miller breathed. It was at that moment, hugging my daughter, that I began to plan the end of the patriarch. That night, after Eliza finally fell asleep in my bed, she didn't want to stay alone in her room. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. August didn't come home. Probably his father had called him with some story, and he preferred to sleep in the main mansion. Better that way. My mind was working as never before. The scene I had witnessed earlier kept repeating, his hands on my daughter, the perverse whisper, her tears. And then his laugh when I confronted him, that absolute certainty of impunity. "Nothing ends unless I want it to, my little toy." And he was right. If we tried to run away, he would find us. If I reported him, no one would believe me. Dr. Henry Miller's word against mine? One of Louisville's most influential men against a country woman? There was no contest. I got up in the early morning and went to the window. From our house, I could see the main mansion illuminated in the center of the grounds, like a medieval castle. How many women before me had looked at that house with the same despair? Mrs. Celeste, the other daughters-in-law? How many girls like my Eliza had been touched, used, broken? At some point during that sleepless night, something changed inside me. The fear that had paralyzed me for decades was replaced by an icy clarity. If the system wouldn't protect me, if justice didn't reach men like Dr. Henry, then I would be my own justice system. The next day, I sent Eliza to my sister Catherine's house in Cincinnati, inventing an emergency. August didn't even question it. He was too busy with his father's business. Julian was in college in Chicago, and Robert on an exchange program in Europe. It was better this way. What I planned to do, I needed to do alone. I spent the week observing Dr. Henry's routine. Even at 75, he maintained a rigorous schedule. Appointments at his private medical office in the morning, lunch at the club with influential friends, afternoons in the administration of the family business, and always, family dinner at 8 o'clock sharp. Sunday dinner was special. All sons and daughters-in-law were required to attend, without exception. It was the moment when he reigned supreme at his solid oak table, dictating the rules for the following week, criticizing anything that wasn't according to his standards, subtly humiliating anyone who dared to challenge him. On Friday, 3 days after the incident with Eliza, Dr. Henry called me to his office in the mansion. My heart raced, but not with fear, not anymore. "Where is my granddaughter?" he asked, as soon as I closed the door behind me. He was sitting in his leather chair, a glass of whiskey in hand, despite it not being past 10 in the morning. "With my sister. She needed time away after what happened." He took a long sip before responding. "And what exactly happened, Elizabeth? Because I have the impression that you may have misinterpreted a private conversation between a grandfather and his granddaughter. I felt the blood rise to my face. I saw what I saw, and Eliza told me what you said to her. About me. About me liking it. He smiled, that smile that for 20 years made me feel small. Well, my dear, don't deny that we had good moments. You were so responsive in the beginning, before you became bitter. He stood up and walked over to me. You know what your problem is? Jealousy. You're jealous because you're aging, and I naturally become interested in younger, fresher versions. She is your granddaughter, I whispered, disgusted. He shrugged. Blood is just chemistry. Desire is physics. Don't come to me with country moralism. He was so close that I could smell his whiskey breath. His hand rose to touch my face, and I needed all my control not to back away. But don't worry, my toy. I still have room for you in my collection. Sunday after dinner, send Eliza to my library. We have unfinished business, and you. His hand went down my neck. You can come afterward, like in the old days. That was the final straw, the confirmation that I had no choice. She'll be here, I lied, with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. On Sunday. When I left the office, my legs were shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was from determination. Dr. Henry had sealed his fate. That afternoon, I visited the back house where Mrs. Zoe, my maid for 2 decades, lived. She was in the yard, hanging clothes on the line. I need to ask you something, Zoe, I began, after verifying that we were alone. About Dr. Henry. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me with eyes that knew too much, eyes that had witnessed decades of secrets on that property. What did he do now? She asked simply. I couldn't hold back the tears. Eliza, he tried. He would. I didn't need to finish. Zoe dropped the sheet she was holding and sat heavily on the bench beside the wash basin. I knew one day it would be her turn, as it was the turn of Mrs. Martha's daughter, the eldest daughter-in-law. My heart stopped. The niece? The one who committed suicide 5 years ago? Zoe made the sign of the cross. It was never suicide, Mrs. Elizabeth. The girl tried to tell her mother, but no one believed her. They called her crazy, committed her to the sanitarium. When she came out, she couldn't bear the shame and pain. I felt as if the ground disappeared beneath my feet. A girl had died. How many more had suffered in silence? I need your help, Zoe. The old maid looked at me intensely. For what? To end this, once and for all. She didn't ask how, she just nodded slowly. It's about time. On Saturday, with the excuse of preparing a special dish for Sunday dinner, I asked Mrs. Zoe to buy a new belt for me. Thick leather, I specified, the kind Dr. Henry wears. Sunday arrived with a clear sky, no clouds. I dressed carefully for dinner, choosing a discreet dress, hair tied back, no makeup. I wanted to be invisible, as I always was in that house. Before leaving, I called Eliza in Cincinnati. Stay there with your aunt, my love. Don't come back until I call again. What are you going to do, Mom? I hesitated. What I should have done a long time ago. Dinner started as always, punctually at 8. Dr. Henry at the head, Mrs. Celeste to his right, the eldest son and his wife right after. August sat to his father's left, and I beside August. Eliza's chair was empty. Where is my granddaughter? Asked Dr. Henry, while the maids served the appetizer. She stayed in Cincinnati, I replied. She wasn't feeling well. I saw a gleam of irritation in his eyes, quickly masked by a smile for the other guests. What a pity, I had a matter to discuss with her. Under the table, my hands tightened on the leather belt I had hidden in my purse. I waited patiently, eating little, drinking less, as dinner progressed. Dr. Henry, as always, dominated the conversation, talking about politics, business, criticizing the government, boasting of his connections. At the end of the meal, when the maids brought coffee, He made one of his usual deprecating jokes. Looking at me with that cruel smile, he said, "Elizabeth seems sad today. Perhaps she misses the times when she was my favorite little toy." The entire table fell into an embarrassed silence. Some forced laughs, lowered gazes. The usual. But this time, I didn't lower my eyes. I looked directly at him, at that aged but still arrogant face, at those eyes that had seen my terror and fed on it. "You know, Dr. Henry," I began, my voice strangely calm. "You're right. I was your toy, as my daughter would be, as others were before me." The silence became even heavier. Mrs. Celeste paled. The other daughter-in-law, Martha, began to tremble. "Elizabeth, you've had too much to drink," interrupted August, placing his hand on my arm. I pushed his hand away. "No, August. I've drunk too little all these years. I've accepted too much. I've kept quiet too much." Dr. Henry laughed, but there was tension in his eyes now. "Looks like my country daughter-in-law has finally found courage. Or would it be madness?" "Courage," I replied, slowly standing up. "The same courage my daughter found to tell me what you tried to do to her. The same courage your grandniece didn't have because no one believed her." The eldest daughter-in-law, Martha, sobbed loudly. Dr. Henry also stood up, his face red with anger. "This is absurd. August, control your wife." But I was already walking toward the head of the table, the leather belt firm in my hands. "The toy broke, Dr. Henry. And now it's your turn to feel what it's like to be used." What happened next was fast, but in my memory, it's as if time had slowed down, each second stretching like molasses. Dr. Henry stood up, knocking the chair backward. His face, normally controlled, showed genuine surprise. I think, in all those years, he never imagined that I would be capable of confronting him. "You've gone mad," he said, looking around at the family, seeking support. "This woman is delirious." But something had changed in the room. The silence was no longer one of complicity. It was one of expectation, as if everyone were holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. I went around the table, approaching him, the belt firm in my hands. "For how long, Dr. Henry? How many women? How many girls?" He took a step back, then composed himself. He became the intimidating patriarch again. "Don't take another step, Elizabeth. You don't know who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I'm messing with," I replied. "A man who uses power to hurt the weaker, who abuses the women in his own family and thinks it's his right." He laughed, that laugh that would haunt me forever. "And what are you going to do? Hit me with that belt? Kill me in front of everyone? Be sensible, my dear. Even if you succeed, you'll spend the rest of your life in jail." It was my turn to smile, a smile I didn't know I possessed. "Maybe, but you won't be there to see it." He must have seen something in my eyes, because for the first time, I saw fear in his. Real fear. Everything happened very quickly after that. He tried to grab a knife from the table. I lunged forward with the belt. There were screams, the sound of dishes breaking. I wrapped the belt around his neck with a strength I didn't know I had. Years of contained anger, of humiliation, of fear for my daughter. Everything transformed into pure energy at that moment. He struggled, his hands scratching mine, his eyes bulging. I could see the exact moment when the realization hit him. He was dying at the hands of his toy. August tried to pull me away, shouting something I couldn't understand. Someone, I think it was Martha, was screaming for me to stop. Others just watched, paralyzed. I don't know how long it lasted. Seconds? Minutes? I just know that I didn't stop until he collapsed in the chair, his face purple, his eyes glazed, his body lifeless. The room plunged into absolute silence. For a moment, no one moved. It was I who broke the silence. I released the belt, which fell beside the body, and looked at everyone around the table. "It's over," I said simply. And then, turning to where Martha was holding the hand of her mother-in-law in shock, "Now she's safe. All of them are." What followed was chaos. August grabbed me by the arms, shouting that I had gone mad, that I had killed his father. The older brother called the police, stammering on the phone. Mrs. Celeste just sat there, looking at her dead husband with an expression I couldn't decipher. Relief? Shock? Maybe a bit of both. I didn't try to run. I didn't try to explain myself. A strange calmness had taken over me, as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders, even knowing that another, equally heavy one, was about to fall on them. The police arrived in minutes. The Miller mansion received special attention after all. I surrendered without resistance. I killed him, I told the sheriff when he arrived. Just me. No one else was involved. At the police station, I told the whole truth. The years of abuse, the threats, what he had tried to do to Eliza. I told about the niece who committed suicide, about the family's complicit silence. The sheriff listened to everything with an impassive expression. When I finished, he sighed deeply. Mrs. Elizabeth, I understand your motives, but the law is clear. You committed premeditated homicide. I know, I replied, and I'm ready to face the consequences. I spent the night in the jail cell. The next morning, Eliza appeared, her eyes red from crying so much. She got permission to see me for a few minutes. Why, Mom? She asked, her hands squeezing mine through the bars. Why didn't we run away together? I held her face between my hands. Because he would have found us, daughter. Because as long as he lived, no woman would be safe. Not you. Not the daughters you might have one day. She cried more. But now they're going to take you away. I'll be without you. Listen to me carefully, I said firmly. You're alive. You're whole. That's what matters. Go to Chicago with your brother. Study medicine as you've always dreamed. Build a life far from this city, far from this family. Use the money I saved in the blue box under my bed. And you? I smiled with all the courage I could gather. I'll be fine. I made my choice, knowing exactly what would come after. When they took her away, I felt as if my heart was split in half. But I didn't regret it. I don't regret it to this day. The trial was quick, considering the influence of the Miller family. August hired the best lawyers, not to defend me, but to ensure I received the maximum sentence. He refused to see or speak to me again. Surprisingly, some voices rose in my support. Mrs. Zoe testified about what she had seen and heard over the years. A former mansion employee came to tell similar stories. And then, the most unexpected, Martha, the eldest daughter-in-law, broke the family silence. She told about her daughter, about how Dr. Henry had abused her for years, about how no one believed her until it was too late. But the judicial system doesn't work based on moral justifications. I confess that part of me expected understanding, perhaps a reduced sentence. That's not what happened. Elizabeth Donovan Miller, this court sentences you for qualified homicide to 20 years of imprisonment, announced the judge, without looking me in the eyes. When they took me handcuffed out of the court, a reporter managed to approach. "Do you regret it?" she asked, microphone extended. I stopped, looked directly at the camera, thinking of all the women who might be watching, of all the Elizas in the world. "No," I replied with simplicity. "I don't regret it. My daughter is safe." And the cycle ended. The first years in prison were the most difficult, adapting to a world of bars and rigid schedules, missing my children, the loneliness in the endless nights. But strangely, I also experienced a freedom that I had never known before. For the first time in decades, I didn't live in fear. I didn't need to look over my shoulder, fearing the approach of familiar steps. Eliza visited me whenever she could. She told me about medical school in Chicago, about how she was building a new life. Eventually, Robert also started visiting me. Only Julian, who was always closer to his father, stayed away for many years. In 2000, after 10 years in prison, I received news that changed everything. I was transferred to the penitentiary in Port Angeles, Washington. At first, I didn't understand the reason. Why would they send me so far away? The answer came in the form of a letter from Martha. After my imprisonment, she had initiated a private investigation into Dr. Henry's business. She discovered things that went far beyond family abuse. Money laundering, influence peddling, even connections to drug trafficking. The Miller family began to crumble under the weight of these revealed secrets. August, trying to save what remained of the empire, made powerful enemies. One of them, according to Martha, had connections in the prison system and arranged my transfer to Washington. For your protection, the letter said, August swore that you would never leave the Louisville prison alive. So I arrived in Port Angeles, a small town on the Olympic Peninsula, far from everything I knew. In the beginning, the loneliness was overwhelming. Visits from my children, already rare due to the distance from Louisville to Chicago, became almost impossible. For almost a year, I didn't see a familiar face. It was in this period of isolation that I found books. The small prison library became my refuge, my window to the world. I began to read everything I could find: novels, poetry, biographies. For the first time, I had time to reflect on my own story. In 2002, I received an unexpected visit. Mrs. Celeste Miller, aged, fragile, almost unrecognizable without her jewelry and fine clothes. She sat across from me in the visiting room, and we remained silent for long minutes. I came to thank you, she finally said, her voice trembling, for doing what I never had the courage to do. She confessed that she had thought about killing her husband many times over 50 years of marriage. She told how he had broken her from the beginning, transforming a vivacious young woman into a silent shadow. How she had seen what he did to me and others, but fear paralyzed her. He's dead, but still alive inside me, she said. You're imprisoned, but you're free. I see it in your eyes. Before leaving, she left me an envelope. Inside, documents proving that she had created a fund to guarantee my support in prison and a small savings for when I got out. It's not compensation, she explained. It's so that you never have to depend on anyone again. It was the only time I saw her. I learned years later that she passed away in 2005, alone in the emptied mansion. In 2006, after 16 years of incarceration, I received extraordinary news. My sentence had been reduced for good behavior. Instead of 20 years, I would serve 18. It meant that in 2008, I would be free. Eliza, by then a doctor graduated from Chicago, came to visit me to celebrate. She was beautiful, strong, with the bright eyes of someone who doesn't carry the weight that I carried. She brought photos of her brothers. Julian, finally reconciled with the idea of having an assassin mother, was working as an engineer in Seattle. Robert had established himself as a university professor in Boston. When you get out, you can live with me in Chicago, offered Eliza. I have a large apartment with plenty of room. I thanked her, but I already had other plans. I'm going to stay here in Port Angeles, I said. I've found a peace here that I never had anywhere else. She didn't understand immediately. How could someone voluntarily want to stay close to a prison? But for me, it made perfect sense. In Port Angeles, no one knew me as the woman who killed her father-in-law. I was just Miss Beth, the lady who liked to read. A complete fresh start. On May 17, 2008, I walked out through the prison gates carrying only a small suitcase with clothes and some favorite books. I was 56 years old, more than half of my hair white, deep wrinkles around my eyes. But I felt strangely young, as if I were being born again. With the money left by Mrs. Celeste, I rented a simple little house by the shore. Little by little, I integrated into the local community. I began attending church, helping with literacy campaigns, teaching children to read on weekends. People welcomed me without asking many questions about my past. In 2010, I met Mr. James, a quiet widower who repaired boats and liked to tell stories of the sea. We started as friends, sharing books and conversations on the porch of my house. He taught me how to fish, to recognize the birds of the peninsula, to feel the rhythms of the Pacific Northwest. I taught him about the books I loved so much. There was no formal request, no specific moment when we decided to be together. It simply happened, as natural as the tide that rises and falls in the sea. He never asked details about my time in prison, and I never felt the need to explain. He accepted me as I was, with my dark past and all. "We only need to look forward, Miss Beth," he would say with his simple wisdom. "What's behind has already been lived." My children came to visit me in 2012, all three together for the first time in decades. They met James, saw my simple but dignified life, and I think they finally understood my choice. Eliza, in particular, seemed relieved to see me at peace. It was during this visit that I met my grandchildren for the first time. Julian's son, a smart 5-year-old boy, and Robert's twins, 2 adorable 3-year-old girls. Eliza didn't have children. She dedicated herself entirely to her medical career, working with traumatized children. "Everything I went through inspired me to help others who didn't have someone to protect them," she explained as we walked along the beach in Port Angeles. I looked at my daughter and felt a pride so great it barely fit in my chest. The cycle had truly been broken. Where there was pain, she created healing. Where there was silence, she gave voice. Where there was fear, she built safety. And I, who once was a carnal toy in the hands of a monster, was now just Miss Beth, a lady who read books, fished in the sea, and sometimes told stories to the village children. Justice has many faces, my dears. The one from the courts condemned me for taking a life. But there's another justice, deeper, that understands that sometimes we need to go through the fire to find the light on the other side. That's what I did that Sunday night, when I wrapped a belt around the patriarch's neck. I went through the fire, and although it burned me terribly, although I lost almost 2 decades behind bars, although I watched my children grow up from a distance, I don't regret it. Because my Eliza is safe, because my granddaughters will never know the terror I knew. Because the cycle of abuse that could have continued for generations was interrupted by the hands of a woman who one day decided not to be a toy anymore. It's funny how life turns out, isn't it? Today, at 73, I'm back at the prison where I spent almost 2 decades of my life. But not as an inmate. I come as a volunteer, 3 times a week, to give reading classes and tell stories to the women who are still serving time. My little house in Port Angeles remains the same, simple and welcoming, with the porch facing the sea. I live there with Mr. James, who is now 78 years old and continues to repair boats, although more slowly. We got married in 2015, a small ceremony attended by my children and some local friends. It was the first time I wore a white dress by my own choice. Our routine is peaceful and predictable, exactly as we like it. I wake up early, with the first rays of sun coming through the window. I prepare a strong coffee and sit on the porch to watch the sea awaken. Sometimes James joins me. Other times he has already left to check the nets he set the night before. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings, I take the bus that takes me to the women's penitentiary. It's a journey of almost 2 hours, but I don't mind. I always carry a bag full of books, some donated by the municipal library, others bought with my savings. When I cross the prison gates, now as a visitor, I always feel a strange shiver. The older guards still recognize me. "Good morning, Miss Beth." Some of the younger inmates have no idea that I was once on the other side of the bars. To them, I'm just the book lady who brings stories from the outside world. The prison director, Dr. Manuel, was the one who invited me to this volunteer work in 2018. He knew my story and knew of my passion for reading. "You can help many women here," he said. "Show them that there is life after these walls." And that's what I try to do. In our reading sessions, we choose books that talk about overcoming, about new beginnings, about strong women. Afterward, we talk about the stories, relating them to each one's experiences. Many of these women are there for reasons similar to mine. They defended themselves or their children against violent men. On other days of the week, I take care of my small garden at the back of the house. I plant medicinal herbs, vegetables, some flowers. The neighbors always stop by for coffee and to take some mint, rosemary, or basil. We've become a sort of meeting point for the neighborhood ladies. On Tuesdays, we have an improvised book club where we discuss the works we are reading. James jokes that I've turned our house into a library. And it's true that books occupy more and more space. On the shelves he built himself, stacked on small tables, even in the guest room we reserve for when the children and grandchildren visit us. Eliza comes to see us twice a year, usually in January and July. She's 53 now, runs a support center for child victims of violence in Chicago. She never married, but adopted a girl 5 years ago, Maria Claire, a 15-year-old teenager who went through terrible situations before finding my daughter. Seeing Eliza as a mother, giving Maria Claire the love and protection that I tried to give her, is one of the greatest joys of my old age. Julian and Robert come less often, once a year, usually at Christmas. They bring their families. My grandchildren are already teenagers, growing up too fast. Julian's son, Arthur, is 18 and has just entered law school. Robert's twins, Lily and Hannah, are 16 and talented, one with music, the other with painting. They are children who grew up knowing their grandmother's story, without secrets or shame. Grandma Beth did what she had to do, I once heard Arthur tell a friend's cousin who asked about me. Our house gets small on these occasions, but it's a squeeze full of love. James transforms completely. The quiet and reserved gentleman becomes the playful grandfather who teaches the grandchildren to fish and tells spooky sea stories. There are pains that never completely disappear. On stormy nights, when the wind beats hard on the windows, sometimes I wake up startled, thinking I'm back in the cell. On certain days, when I see news about violence against women and children in the newspapers, I feel that same anger boiling inside me. But I've learned to live with these scars. They are part of who I am, like the wrinkles on my face and the calluses on my hands. Each mark tells a story of survival. People here in Port Angeles know me as the book lady or Mr. James's wife. Few know details of my past, and that's fine. I don't hide who I was or what I did, but I also don't let it define me. When I look back at the young Elizabeth who left Kentucky full of dreams, at the desperate woman who killed to protect her daughter, at the inmate who found refuge in books, I see the same line connecting everything: the search for freedom. Freedom from fear, from oppression, from bars, whether visible or invisible. And here, in this corner of Washington, between the sea and the forest, I finally found that freedom. It's not perfect, it's not without pain, but it's mine. Earned with tears, blood, and time. A lot of time. And for that, perhaps, it's even more precious. My dears, in telling my story, I don't seek to justify what I did. A life was taken by my hands, and that is a burden I carry with me. But I hope you understand that sometimes, when all paths seem blocked, when the system that should protect fails, a mother does what needs to be done to save her child. If you are trapped in an abusive situation, if you feel there is no way out, if you fear for your life or for the lives of your children, listen to what this old woman has to say. Don't wait until you reach the point I did. Seek help before. Today, there are support networks that didn't exist in my time. There are people willing to believe, to extend a hand, to offer shelter. In any country, in any city, there are organizations dedicated to protecting women and children. Look for them. If the first person doesn't believe you, look for another and another and another. Don't give up seeking help. Don't let fear paralyze you as it paralyzed me for so many years. Silence is the abuser's best friend. He feeds on shadows, on secrets, on shame. When you speak up, when you expose what is happening, you are already taking the first step toward freedom. Always remember, you are not alone in this battle. Even when it seems that no one is seeing, that no one cares, there are thousands of women who have gone through what you are going through, who survived, who found a way out of the labyrinth of pain. For years, I carried the weight of silence as if it were a cross too heavy for my shoulders. I believed that if I endured everything alone, I could protect my children. But silence only protects the monsters, never their victims. True strength isn't in enduring the unbearable, but in having the courage to say, no more, to set boundaries, to demand respect, to recognize that you deserve a life without fear. Each time a woman breaks the silence, she is not only saving herself, she is lighting a torch that can guide other women lost in the darkness. That's how we break the cycle of abuse, one voice at a time. If my story serves only for a single woman to find the courage to seek help before reaching the point I reached, then it will have been worth reliving these painful memories. My dear viewers listening from all corners of this country and the world, if you know someone living under the shadows of fear, be the extended hand that I didn't have. Believe them. Support them. Help them find a path that doesn't end in a prison cell or in a grave in the cemetery. Please do a favor for this old lady who has seen much pain and much healing in this life. Subscribe to Grandparents' Tales right now and hit the notification bell. Each subscription means one more aware person, one more attentive eye, one more hand that can interrupt the cycle of violence before it destroys another family. And leave me a comment with the word freedom. I want to know who stayed with me until the end of this journey, who understood that even in the darkest situations, we can always find a path to the light. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Your participation is part of the protection chain we are building together. God bless each one of you. This old Beth thanks you for the time we spent together today. And always remember, even the most broken toy can have enough strength to break the chains that imprison it. When my husband came home unexpectedly and found me on the floor surrounded by our 15 children, I thought I would finally be saved. But he looked at the boys and said, "I leave for 1 week, and this is all you managed? She's still conscious." That's when I discovered that hell had 16 demons, not 15. Hello there, my dear ones. What a joy to have your company here with me this afternoon. Please make yourselves comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, because the story I'm going to tell you today is one of those that weighs heavy on the heart, but also teaches us so much about the strength we never knew we had inside us. My name is Rose Patterson, but you can just call me Rose. That's how everyone knows me here. I'm 76 years old, born and raised in a small town called Cedar Falls, there in rural Tennessee, right near the Kentucky border. You know those little places that have more cattle than people? Well, that was it. Today I still live here in Cedar Falls, in a simple little house full of love, very different from the life I had for many, many years. Every day I wake up early, when the rooster is still crowing at the neighbors, and the first thing I do is water my plants. I have a little garden in front of the house that's my pride and joy, honey. Roses, geraniums, snake plants to ward off the evil eye, those little things. After I finish taking care of my little plants, I make my coffee with cream, nice and hot, get my bread with butter, and sit there on the porch to watch the day break. It's in those moments, looking at the sky dawning, that I thank God for every day I live in peace. You know how I started this routine with plants? It was right after I managed to get out of that life I'm going to tell you about. I was living in a little rented room, alone for the first time in my life, not really knowing what to do with myself. A very good neighbor, Mrs. Teresa, gave me a little fern cutting and said, "Rose, take care of this little plant the way you should have been taken care of." I cried so much that day, honey, but I took care of that fern with all the love in the world. And when I saw it growing, sprouting new leaves, green and beautiful, I understood that I could bloom again too. Since then, I've never stopped growing my little plants. Today I have more than 30 little pots scattered around the house. I'm sitting here in my rocking chair, that wooden one that creaks nicely when you move. I have a crocheted blanket that I made myself covering my legs, because even in the heat here, this old lady already feels a little chill in her joints. On the side table, I have my rosary, my reading glasses, and a photograph of my grandchildren. Ah, the grandchildren I chose to have in my heart, not those by blood who caused me so much pain. I'll explain that better in a little bit. Before I continue, I'd like to make a special request to you watching me now. If Grandma Rose's story here is touching your heart, please subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and hit that like button, okay, my love? This helps so much so that other people who need to hear this message can also find me. And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos from this doting grandma here. Oh, and tell me here in the comments. From what corner of America are you watching me? And at what time of day did you find this video from Grandma? Early in the morning with coffee, in the middle of the afternoon, or already in the evening after dinner? I read all the comments, believe me? And I get so happy knowing where you're from and when you take time to listen to this old lady's stories. Tell me, okay? Let's create a chain of love from north to south of this great country. Now, taking a deep breath here, I need to talk about the subject that brings me here today. My dear ones, for many years of my life, I lived in a big house on an isolated farm, married to a powerful man. I had 15 children. 15, can you imagine? But this wasn't a story of a happy, large family like you might be thinking. It was a story of survival, of silent pain, and of a day when everything changed, when I discovered a truth that broke my heart in half, but also gave me strength to be reborn. So grab another coffee there, get settled in your chair, because this story begins back in my girlhood days when I didn't even imagine what life had in store for me. I was born in 1949, right at the end of June, when winter was starting to bite here in rural Tennessee. My mother, Linda, used to say that it was so cold that night, and she was afraid I wouldn't make it. I was so tiny. But I did, thank God. I came into the world in our humble little house, with dirt floors and wooden walls, with the help of the village midwife, Mrs. Zoe, who smelled like medicinal herbs and had hands as steady as old tree roots. My father, Robert, was a traveling salesman. He spent more time on the road with his truck loaded with merchandise than at home with us. He carried coffee, beans, flour, sometimes cured ham, from here in Cedar Falls to neighboring towns. He was a man of few words, thin as a fishing rod, with skin weathered from so much sun. When he was home, he'd sit on the wooden stool at the kitchen door, roll a cigarette, and stay there smoking quietly, looking at nothing. He was never one for conversation, never one for affection. But he also never raised a hand to me or my siblings. He was just absent, you know, like we were part of the house's landscape, like the table, like the pots hanging on the wall. My mother was the opposite. Linda was all affection, all care. Short, plump, with those red cheeks from living near the wood stove. She always wore a printed cotton dress, an apron over it, and a scarf tied on her head. She took care of everything: the house, the garden, the chickens, me and my 3 siblings. I was the second oldest. There was Robert Jr., who was 2 years older than me, then Linda Jr., 3 years younger, and finally Robert III, the baby, who was born when I was about 8 years old. You know what I noticed, honey? All of us carried our father's Robert or mother's Linda in our names. Robert, Linda, Robert Jr., Linda Jr. I, Rose, was the exception. My mother told me, years later, that she had insisted so much on giving me the name of her grandmother, Rose, who was Irish and had come to America on a ship when she was a young woman. My father had grumbled, but let it be. I think it was the only wish of my mother's that he respected in his whole life. We lived in a little house with only 3 rooms. There was the kitchen, which was where life happened, with the wood stove that my mother lit every day before sunrise. The smell of burning wood, of brewed coffee, of day-old bread heating on the griddle. That was the smell of my childhood. There was the living room, which we only used when visitors came, with 2 long wooden benches, a little table in the middle, and a picture of the Virgin Mary hanging on the wall, always with a little sprig of dried rosemary in front. And there was the bedroom, where we all slept piled together. My parents in a double bed that creaked, me and my sister Linda Jr. on a straw mattress on the floor, and my male siblings on another mattress on the other side. There was no door separating anything. We heard everything. Father's heavy breathing, his snoring, the low conversations in the early morning. I learned from an early age to sleep lightly, always alert. Our routine was simple and heavy. My mother woke up first, before the rooster crowed. I'd hear her getting up slowly, dragging her bare feet to the stove. Soon came the sound of wood being broken, the match striking, the fire starting to crackle. When the smell of coffee reached the bedroom, it was time to get up. I had to help Mother with breakfast, fetch water from the well, sift the cornmeal, feed the chickens. My sister Linda Jr. was still too small to help, so she'd play in the yard while my mother and I worked. After breakfast, which was just bread with lard and coffee with lots of brown sugar, I'd go to the backyard to help Mother wash clothes in the stone basin. That basin was cold, honey. The water came straight from the spring behind the hill, and it was so cold it left our fingers red and stiff. But we scrubbed anyway, with that ash soap Mother made, and wrung it hard until the clothes were almost dry. Then we'd hang them on the barbed wire line that Father had strung between two trees. Only around 10 in the morning, when the sun was already high, did I have a little time to play. I'd play with the neighborhood girls. There was Clara, Nancy, and Teresa, who were my best friends. We'd play house under the big persimmon tree that was on Mr. Walter's property, the neighbor. We'd make little stoves out of bricks, little pots from old tin cans, and food from leaves and dirt. Clara always wanted to be the mother because she was the most bossy. I was usually the oldest daughter who had to take care of the younger siblings. Funny how play imitated life, right? Other times, we'd play hide and seek in the middle of the cornfield that surrounded the houses. We'd run between the corn stalks, hide behind the trees, scream when we were caught. We'd come home all dirty with red dirt, with leaves in our hair, and get scolded by Mother. But it was worth it. Those were the only moments when I felt like a real child, you know? Light, free, without obligation. There was one day, I must have been about 7, when Clara and I found a bird's nest that had fallen on the ground. There were 3 little blue eggs inside, so perfect they looked painted. We were enchanted. We carefully took the nest to my house, and my mother helped us put it in a little box lined with cloth, near the stove to keep it warm. I spent days taking care of those little eggs, waiting for them to open. But they never opened. One day my mother explained, with that gentle voice of hers, that the birds inside had already died, that without the heat of the mother bird, there was no way to survive. I cried so much that day. I cried for the birds, but I think I also cried for a sadness I couldn't even explain properly at the time. When I turned 9, I started noticing things that had gone unnoticed before. I noticed that my mother was always tired, always with that expression of someone carrying an invisible weight. I noticed that when my father came back from trips, she became tense, spoke quietly, moved around the house on tiptoe as if she wanted not to be noticed. My brother Robert Jr. started to become like my father, quiet, serious, bossy with me and Linda Jr. He was only 11, but he already talked to us the way grown men talk to women, giving orders, expecting to be obeyed. One night, I must have been about 10, I woke up to a strange noise coming from my parents' room. It was my mother crying softly, in that muffled way of someone who doesn't want to be heard. I heard my father's voice, thick and irritated. "Shut that mouth, Linda! You're making a scene over nothing!" Then silence. I lay there on my straw mattress with my heart tight, not knowing what to do. The next morning, my mother had a swollen eye. She said she had bumped into the closet door in the dark. But I was old enough to know that closet doors don't leave bruises like that. It was around this time that talks about my marriage began. I hadn't even turned 12 yet, but my mother was already talking, all excited, about a young man from town who had seen me at Mass and had asked my father about me. "He's a good man, Rose. He has land, he has cattle. He'll take good care of you." I didn't understand why I needed to marry so early. Clara was also already promised, Nancy too. It seemed like that's what they expected from us, to grow up fast, become someone's wife, take care of house and children. This young man was named Augustus. He was 28 when he met me. I was 11. He was tall, strong, with a thick mustache and the manner of someone who commands. He wore a white shirt always well pressed, a leather hat, and came to our house riding a bay horse that gleamed in the sun. He brought gifts for my mother, a piece of fabric, a pound of refined sugar, things we weren't used to having. My father became all-important when he appeared, offered coffee, made conversation about cattle and land business. Augustus looked at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't the look of someone who sees a child. It was the look of someone who's evaluating, measuring, choosing. He'd smile, show his white teeth and say, "This girl is going to be a beautiful woman." And hard-working, just like her mother. My mother would be all proud. I'd just feel embarrassed, wanting to disappear. At 12 years old, my parents announced that I was going to marry Augustus as soon as I turned 13. They said it was a blessing, that I was going to have a good life, that I would never want for anything. My mother cried the day she told me, but they were tears of joy, she said. "You're going to have everything I never had, my daughter." A big house, pretty clothes, plenty of food. I wanted to ask, "And love, Mother?" And the desire to study, to know the world. But I didn't ask. Girls didn't ask those things back then. I married Augustus 3 days after my 13th birthday, on a Thursday morning, at the little church in Cedar Falls. It was July 1962, and it was bitterly cold. I remember I was shivering at the church door, but it wasn't just from the cold, my dear ones. It was from fear. Fear of leaving my mother's house, fear of that man I barely knew, fear of what was to come. I wore a white dress that my mother had sewn for weeks, working by lamplight after everyone went to sleep. It was simple, cotton, with some little embroidery on the hem and collar. My mother had cried when she dressed me that morning, arranging my hair pulled back in a bun that pulled at my scalp. "You look so beautiful, my daughter, so grown up." But when I looked in the broken little mirror she was holding, I saw only a scared girl with eyes too big for her thin face. The ceremony was quick. Father Oscar said some words in Latin that I didn't understand. Augustus put a thin ring on my finger. It was too big. It kept spinning. And that was it. I was a married woman. I was 13 years old and 2 weeks old. Augustus's farm was about 8 miles from my parents' house, in an even more isolated region. We got there by wagon in the middle of the afternoon. I remember the big wooden gate, the dirt road that went up between the pastures, and the house. My God in heaven, that house. It was huge compared to the little house where I grew up. It had 2 floors, 8 rooms, a porch in front and back. It was painted white with blue windows and had a huge yard surrounded by persimmon, guava, and lemon trees. "It's all yours now," Augustus said, with that manner of someone giving a valuable handout. "You're the lady of this house. You'll take good care of it, won't you?" I nodded, still dizzy from it all. Lady? I didn't feel like a lady of anything. I felt like a doll that had been moved from one shelf to another. In the first months, Augustus was different from what I expected. He wasn't affectionate, never was. But he also wasn't violent. He was just distant, busy. He'd wake up before sunrise, go out to take care of the cattle, the fences, negotiations with other farmers. He'd come back at night, eat in silence the dinner I prepared, with the help of Mrs. Eugenia, the old cook who already worked on the farm before me, and then sit on the porch to smoke and drink whiskey until bedtime. The nighttime part, honey. The nighttime part was what hurt me most. He'd enter the room, blow out the lamp, and do what a husband does with his wife. But there was no conversation, no care. It was mechanical, quick, painful. I'd lie there, looking at the dark ceiling, waiting for it to end. When it ended, he'd turn over and sleep. I'd stay awake, with my hands gripping the sheet, feeling my whole body ache, and crying softly until sleep came. At 14, I got pregnant with my first child. Augustus was happy in a way I had never seen. He called his friends to celebrate, killed a pig, made barbecue. "It's going to be a boy," he announced to everyone, beating his chest. "It's going to be my heir." I secretly hoped it would be a girl. I thought that if it was a girl, maybe he'd be less interested, would leave me alone for a while. But a boy was born. In May 1964, after labor that lasted almost 20 hours, little Augustus was born. Just like that, little Augustus. They didn't even ask me what name I wanted to give. Augustus decided, and that was it. When they put that little baby in my arms, I felt something strange. It was my son, had come from inside me, but at the same time seemed to belong more to the father than to me. Augustus would pick him up, lift him for everyone to see, say, "This one here is going to be strong like his father. He's going to command all this land someday." I barely finished my postpartum period and was already pregnant again. And again. And again. Between 1964 and 1978, I had 15 children. 15. 13 boys and 2 girls. All the names chosen by Augustus, Augustus Jr. Edward, Walter, Edgar, Ronald, Claude, Adam, Joseph, Edison, Walden, the girls Edith and Valerie, and then 3 more boys, Claude Jr., Edmund, and Reginald. With each child that was born, my body became more tired, more worn. I had deep stretch marks on my belly, sagging breasts from so much nursing, my back aching constantly. At 29, I looked like I was 50. Mrs. Eugenia, poor thing, tried to help me. She'd make herbal tea to give strength, massage my back, take care of the boys while I rested. "You need to tell your husband to stop, child," she'd whisper. "Your body can't take any more." But how could I talk? A husband wasn't to be contradicted. He was to be obeyed. Augustus governed the house with an iron fist. He had rules for everything. Coffee had to be on the table at exactly 6 in the morning. His shirt had to be ironed without a wrinkle. The children had to be quiet when he was home. "I don't want to hear noise from brats," he'd say. "If I hear it, you're the one who gets it." And he kept his word. Any crying, any running around, any fight between the boys, I was the one who got scolded. Sometimes just scolding, the kind that humiliates, that makes you feel smaller than an ant. Other times, when he had been drinking more, it was slaps, hair pulling, pushing against the wall. But the worst, my dear ones, the worst wasn't even what he did to me. It was what he was teaching our children. I saw, clear as day, the seed he was planting in those boys. From little on, he repeated, "Men command, women obey. Men are strong, women are weak. You have to put authority in your house, or it becomes chaos." Augustus Jr., the oldest, at 8 years old already talked to me the way his father talked. "Mom, bring my plate here." "Mom, did you heat my bathwater?" He didn't ask. He ordered. When the boys reached 10, 12 years old, it got worse. They began to imitate their father in everything. In the way they walked, in the way they talked, in the way they looked at me. It was as if I stopped being a mother and became a maid, or worse. I became an object that was there to serve, to clean, to cook, to get beaten when things didn't go the way they wanted. There was something that happened, and that took me a while to understand properly. Augustus traveled a lot. He had cattle business in several cities in the region. He'd go to Asheville, to Knoxville, to Bristol. Sometimes he'd be gone for a week. I thought that when he left, the house would be lighter, calmer. In the first years, it even was. But as the boys grew up, everything changed. The first time I noticed something was very wrong was when Augustus Jr. was about 15. His father had traveled on Monday to Knoxville, was only coming back on Saturday. On Tuesday morning, I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, beans, rice, stewed pork. The older boys, Augustus Jr., Edward, Walter, and Edgar, came into the kitchen all together. They had an expression on their faces that gave me chills. "Mom, Dad said that when he's not here, we're the ones who command here," Augustus Jr. said, crossing his arms. He was already bigger than me, strong, with the face of a grown man. "Of course, my son," I replied, stirring the pot. "You're the men of the house when Dad's not here. You can rest assured that I'll take care of everything properly." "It's not that," Edward continued. He was 13. "We don't just want you to take care. We want you to obey, just like you obey Dad." My heart started beating faster. "But I do obey, my son. Don't I obey?" That's when Augustus Jr. came close, so close I could smell his sweat. "You talked back to Dad last week. We heard. You said you were tired. Dad didn't like it." He paused, and his eyes became hard. "We're not going to tolerate disrespect either." Before I could respond, Walter took the wooden spoon from my hand. "Go to the living room. We want to talk to you." It wasn't a request. It was an order. My boys, whom I had carried in my womb, whom I had nursed, whom I had rocked to sleep, were giving me orders as if they were my owners. I went to the living room with trembling legs. They surrounded me. 4 boys, teenagers, looking down at me, making me feel small. And there, that Tuesday afternoon, with the sun coming through the window cracks and the smell of lunch burning on the stove that I left unattended, my children taught me the first lesson of what would be my life from then on. Augustus Jr. spoke for almost an hour. He said that while Dad was away, they were responsible for maintaining discipline in the house, that I had to obey them the same way I obeyed Dad, that if I failed in any task, they would correct me the way Dad corrected. The other 3 stood there, around, nodding, agreeing with every word. When they finished talking, they sent me back to the kitchen. The beans had overflowed, the meat had stuck to the bottom of the pan. I cleaned everything crying, with my hands shaking so much I broke a plate. The sound of the plate shattering on the floor echoed through the entire house. Seconds later, I heard heavy footsteps coming toward the kitchen. "Mom's breaking things now?" Edward said from the door, with that tone that chilled my soul. "I guess she hasn't learned yet." And that's when, my dear ones, at that moment, with my children looking at me that way, I understood. Hell had just begun. But the worst was yet to come. The worst would be discovering where they had learned exactly what to do to me when Dad wasn't around. The years that followed were the darkest of my life, my dear ones. If I could erase some piece of my memory, it would be this period between 1979 and 1985. But you can't erase it, right? It stays there, engraved in one's soul, heavy as a stone in the chest. The system my children created was simple and cruel. Every time Augustus traveled, and he traveled more and more, sometimes twice a month, the boys took control of the house. In the beginning, it was just the 4 oldest, Augustus Jr., Edward, Walter, and Edgar. But as the others grew up, they joined the group too. When it got to 1983, there were already 9 teenage and grown boys living in that house. 9 against 1. They had rules, absurd rules that changed according to their will. One day, I had to serve lunch at exactly noon. If I was 5 minutes late, there was a consequence. Another day, they decided that clothes had to be ironed and folded in a specific way, with the fold turned in, not out. If I made a mistake, there was a consequence. The dishes had to be washed and put away before 8 at night. The porch floor had to be swept 3 times a day. The food couldn't have too much salt, nor too little salt. It had to be at the exact point they liked. And you know what the consequence was, honey. It was what they called a correction session. They'd call me to the living room, the same living room where I had received visits from my mother years ago, where there were pictures of saints on the wall, where it should be a family place. But that living room had become my tribunal. They'd sit on the benches and chairs, forming a semicircle. I'd stand in the middle. Augustus Jr., who was the leader, always started. "Mom, you failed today. Do you know where you failed?" Sometimes I knew, sometimes I didn't. But my answer didn't matter. They had already decided what my punishment would be. It started with words, humiliations. "You're incompetent. You're not even good enough to take care of a house. Dad should have married another woman, one who was worth something." Each word was like a slap. I'd stand there, head down, biting my lip not to cry, because if I cried, they'd say I was being dramatic, and then it would get worse. After the words came the physical punishments, slaps with shoes. They'd take off their shoes and hit, on my back, on my legs, on my arms. They didn't hit my face because it would leave marks, and when Dad came back, he would see. They had this care, you know? This cold calculation of how to hurt without leaving visible evidence. Belt lashes, too. Edward was the one who most liked using belts. He'd wrap the end around his hand and crack it in the air before hitting my back. The sound alone made me tremble before the pain even came. There was one time, it was winter of 1981, when I burned the beans. I was so tired that day, I had spent the night awake with Reginald, who had a fever, that I ended up dozing off standing up, leaning on the kitchen counter, while the beans cooked. When I woke up to the smell of burning, it was too late. The pot had stuck, the beans had turned to charcoal. The boys called me to the living room. There were 7 that day. The older ones were already 20, 19, 17 years old. Grown men, strong. When I entered the living room and saw them all there, I felt my legs weaken. "You burned the food," Augustus Jr. said, with that cold voice he had learned from his father. "We're going to go without lunch because of you. Do you think that's fair?" "No, my son. Sorry. I'll make another one. I'll make another one real quick," I begged. "You're not going to make anything," Walter replied. "You're going to learn not to waste food." He got the burned pot from the kitchen, still smoking, and put it in front of me. "Eat it." I looked at him without understanding. "What do you mean, my son?" "Eat the burned beans. Since you made it, you eat it." My dear ones, I tried to explain that I couldn't, that it was too burned, that it would make me sick, but they insisted, and when I refused, they got the shoe. They beat me so much that day that I couldn't lie on my back for 3 days. Mrs. Eugenia, poor thing, cried while putting ointment on my wounds. "This isn't right, Miss Rose. This is no way for a son to treat his mother." But what could we do? She was an employee. I was a hostage. Neither of us had anywhere to run. The worst of all, and this hurts me to tell even today, was seeing my 2 daughters growing up in the middle of that. Edith and Valerie, my girls. I prayed every day that they would stay blind to that violence, that they wouldn't get used to it. But how could they not get used to it, right? They saw their brothers treating me that way, saw their father treating me that way, and learned that that's how it worked. That men command, women bow their heads. Edith, when she turned 15, was promised to a farmer from Bristol, a 40-year-old man, widower, with 3 children. I tried to talk to her, tried to warn her. "My daughter, don't accept this marriage. Run away, go live with your aunt in Nashville." But she looked at me with contempt. "Mom, you're weak. I'm not going to be weak like you. I'm going to marry a good man and be respected." She married in 1982, and I never heard from her again. They say she disappeared a few years later. To this day, I don't know if she's alive or dead. Valerie left home at 16, ran away with a trucker who passed through the region. She left a note under my pillow. "Mom, sorry, but I can't stand this house anymore. I'd rather take my chances out there than stay here." When the boys discovered she had run away, guess who got beaten? Me, as if I was to blame for my daughter escaping the hell they themselves had created. The isolation was complete. I couldn't leave the farm. There was no telephone, no car, no way to ask for help. My mother had died in 1980 from a stroke. When I went to the funeral, I came back knowing I had lost the only person in the world who truly cared about me. My father had already died years before. My siblings had their own lives, their own problems. No one knew what happened inside that big, beautiful house, surrounded by fruit trees and green pasture. From the outside, it was paradise. Inside, it was hell. There was one day that marked me a lot, my dear ones. It was Augustus Jr.'s birthday, in May 1984. He was turning 20. Augustus had come back from a trip just for the celebration. We killed a steer, made barbecue, invited half the town. The house was full of people, music, laughter. I served everyone, brought beer, brought meat, cleaned tables. Nobody noticed I was limping. I had gotten a belt lash on my thigh 2 days before because Edward's clothes hadn't dried in time. At the end of the night, when they were all drunk, Augustus Jr. stood on a chair and made a speech. He talked about his father, about how he was a man of respect, an example. He talked about his brothers, about how they were united and strong. And then he looked at me. And I thanked my mother, who always took care of us, who always kept the house in order. Everyone applauded. I forced a smile, waved. Inside, I was bleeding. Later that night, when the guests left, Augustus called me to the room. I thought he was going to want what a husband wants. But no. He sat on the edge of the bed, lit a cigarette, and said, "You're too thin, Rose. You look sick." People commented. "That makes me look bad, understand? You need to take better care of yourself." I stayed quiet. He continued. "And the boys said, you've been failing in your duties when I'm not here. That can't continue. I can't travel worried, thinking the house is going to become chaos." I took a deep breath and risked, "Augustus, the boys. They're very hard on me. They treat me badly when you leave." He took a long drag on his cigarette, looked at me, and laughed. It wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a laugh of scorn. "Hard. Rose, they're men. Men need to learn to command, and you need to learn to obey, which is your role." He put out the cigarette in the ashtray and got up. "If you can't handle it, that's your problem. Straighten yourself out." That night, lying in the dark, I understood something terrible. There was no salvation. There was nowhere to run. There was nobody who would listen to me. The whole world thought I had a blessed life, married to a rich man, 15 healthy children, big house. Who would believe that inside those walls I was less than nothing? That my own children, whom I had generated and raised, treated me like a work animal that gets beaten when it doesn't work properly? I began to have bad thoughts, thoughts of ending it all at once. I'd look at the deep well in the yard and think, would there be time to fill my lungs with water before someone pulled me out? I'd look at the big knife in the kitchen and think, would it hurt a lot? But then came the guilt, the religion my mother had put in my head since I was little. Suicide is a mortal sin, Rose. Those who kill themselves go to hell. And I thought, I'm already in hell. Could there be one worse than this? In 1985, I was 36, but looked 60. My hair had started to turn gray, my teeth were falling out. I had already lost 3. My skin was yellowish, full of purple spots that never completely disappeared. I weighed 95 pounds. Mrs. Eugenia forced me to eat, put the plate in front of me, and stayed there until I finished. You need strength, Miss Rose. You need to endure. Endure for what? I thought. But I ate, mechanically, without tasting anything. It was that year that the worst happened. The moment that, to this day, when I close my eyes, still makes me tremble. It was a Saturday afternoon. August, chilly. Augustus had traveled on Thursday, was only coming back on Monday. The boys had invented a new rule. I couldn't sit during the day. I had to stay standing, working all the time. If they caught me sitting, I got shoe lashes. I was exhausted. I had spent the dawn washing clothes. They dirtied clothes on purpose, I'm sure, just to give me more work. My legs were swollen, the varicose veins throbbing with pain. At 3 p.m, I couldn't take it. I sat on a little stool in the kitchen just for a minute, just to rest. I closed my eyes and sleep came quickly, in that heavy way of someone who's at their limit. I woke up to a scream. It was Joseph, one of the middle ones, who had entered the kitchen and seen me sleeping sitting down. "Look at this. The lazy one is sleeping on the job," he called the others. They all came. 11 boys, because the 3 youngest were still children and were playing outside. 11 of my children surrounded me in that kitchen. "Are you making fun of us, Mom?" Augustus Jr. said, and there was real anger in his eyes. "We make rules, you ignore them. We correct, you don't learn. I think we've been too soft." He looked at his brothers. "Today she's going to learn for real. My dear ones, What happened that afternoon I won't describe in detail because it still makes me sick to remember. But I'll say that I screamed so much my voice went hoarse, that Mrs. Eugenia locked herself in the back room and prayed the whole rosary out loud so she wouldn't hear my screams. That when it was over, I was on the kitchen floor, curled up, with my whole body aching, my mouth bleeding, and with the certainty that I was going to die there, in that house, and nobody was going to cry for me. But I didn't die. The body endures more than we imagine, you know? I stayed in bed for 3 days. Mrs. Eugenia took care of me, hid from the boys that I couldn't get up. She told them I had a fever, a bad flu, that I needed rest. They didn't even care. While I was bedridden, they ate the food Mrs. Eugenia made and thought it was great not having to put up with my incompetence. When Augustus came back on Monday, I had already dragged myself out of bed. I was standing, preparing dinner, pretending everything was fine. He didn't even ask how the week had been. He ate, praised the food, and went to the porch to smoke. Another normal week at the horror farm. It was after that episode that something began to change inside me. It wasn't hope, no. I didn't have hope anymore. It was anger. A cold anger kept deep inside. An anger that said, I'm not going to die here. I'm not going to give them that pleasure. I didn't know yet how I was going to get out of there, but I knew that someday, somehow, I was leaving, even if it was the last act of my life. September 1985 arrived with that dry heat that leaves the earth cracked and the throat rough. It had been 3 weeks since that terrible episode in the kitchen, and I still felt pain in my ribs when I breathed deeply. But I kept standing, kept working, kept surviving. That's all I knew how to do. Survive one more day. Augustus had traveled again, this time to Knoxville, to resolve a land deed issue. He said it would take a week, maybe 10 days. When I heard this, my stomach churned. 10 days. 10 days alone with them. 10 days of correction sessions, of humiliations, of pain. I prayed quietly. God, give me strength. Just that. Just strength to endure. The first days were as always, absurd rules, endless work, punishments for any little thing. On Tuesday, Claude said his shirt smelled bad. It didn't. I had washed it properly, ironed it, folded it. But he said it did, so it did. I took 3 shoe lashes. On Wednesday, Walden thought the meat at lunch was tough. I got more shoe lashes and went without eating, as punishment for wasting good food. On Thursday, Edison tripped over a broom I had left leaning against the wall. "Are you trying to kill me, Mom? Want me to break my face?" he yelled. And there I went to the living room again. But it was on Friday that everything changed. It was on Friday that the last straw fell and the glass that was already cracked shattered completely. It was late afternoon, the sun was already setting, painting the sky that orange-purple that always reminded me of my childhood. I was in the kitchen, finishing washing the dinner dishes. My hands were red and swollen from the hot water, my nails broken from so much pot scrubbing. Mrs. Eugenia had left early. She lived in a little house in the back of the farm. But on Fridays, she visited her sister in town and only came back Saturday morning. The boys were all in the living room, playing cards and drinking beer. I heard their laughter, their shouts when someone won the round. It seemed like a normal gathering of brothers, you know? If someone from outside saw it, they'd think it was nice. United family, having fun. Nobody would imagine what happened in that house. I finished the dishes, dried my hands on the apron, and went to the living room to say I was going to sleep. I always did this, asked permission to sleep, as if I were a child and they were my parents. "Excuse me, my children. May I go rest?" Augustus Jr. looked at me over his cards. He had a strange expression on his face, a mixture of amusement and cruelty. "Wait a minute, Mom. We want to talk to you." My heart raced. Talking was never a good sign. "What is it, my son?" He put down his cards on the table and got up. The others did the same, one by one, until they were all standing, surrounding me. There were 10 that night. Reginald, the youngest, was sleeping. 10 grown men, strong, tall, and me, small, thin, tired. "We were talking here," Edward began, "and we think you're getting too relaxed. You're failing too much. Every day there's something wrong." "I try hard, my son. I swear that—" "Shut up," Walter cut me off. "We didn't ask anything. We're talking. You listen." I stayed silent, trembling. Augustus Jr. continued. "We decided that today the correction is going to be different, more educational, so you learn once and for all." That's when Edgar left the room and came back carrying a bucket. A bucket full of water. My dear ones, when I saw that bucket, something inside me screamed, "Danger." "What are you going to do?" I asked, and my voice came out thin, scared. "Nothing much, Mom," Augustus Jr. said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're just going to kneel here, holding this bucket, until we decide you've learned. It seems like little, right? A bucket of water. But my dear ones, that bucket was heavy." And staying kneeling on the hard wooden floor, with knees that already ached from so much work, with arms stretched out holding the weight. It was torture. I knelt down. I took the bucket. I stretched my arms forward as they ordered. At first I could handle it. But after 5 minutes, my arms began to tremble. After 10, the pain was like fire going up from my wrists to my shoulders. After 15, I was crying, begging, "Please, my children, I can't take it anymore." "Yes, you can," Edward said, drinking his beer calmly. "Women can take a lot. You say so yourself." When the bucket fell, because it fell, my arms couldn't hold it anymore. The water spread all over the floor. The boys exploded. "Look what you did! You wet everything! Now you're going to have to clean it up." They gave me a rag and told me to dry the floor. Still on my knees, dragging the soaked rag, scrubbing each board. My tears dripped on the floor along with the water from the bucket. I was at my limit, at my absolute limit. And it was there, in that moment, drying that floor, hearing my children's laughter, that I had a thought I had never had before. A clear, crystalline thought that cut through all the confusion in my mind. I'd rather die trying to get out of here than die inside here. I finished cleaning. They sent me to the kitchen to make fresh coffee. I went, with wobbly legs, with my whole body aching. I put the water to boil, put the powder in the filter, and while the coffee dripped, I held onto the edge of the stove and thought, how? How do I get out of here? I had no money. I had nowhere to go. I didn't know anyone who could help me. All my family had died or disappeared. The neighbors were Augustus's friends. The whole town respected him and thought I was lucky to be his wife. If I ran away, they'd look for me. They'd bring me back. And then, God in heaven, what would they do to me? I took the coffee to the living room. I served each one. When I got close to Augustus Jr., my hand trembled and I spilled a little on the table. It was by accident. I swear to God it was by accident. But he didn't care about that. He jumped up, took the still hot cup, and threw the rest of the coffee on my blouse. I screamed in pain. The coffee burned my belly, my chest. I ran to the kitchen, tore off my blouse, threw cold water. My skin was red, burning. I collapsed on the floor right there and sobbed so loudly I couldn't stop. All the pain of those years came out at once. I screamed, hit the floor with my fists, spit out words I had never had the courage to say. God, why? Why did you abandon me? Why did you let me suffer so much? I can't take it anymore. I can't. Mrs. Eugenia wasn't there to console me. The boys didn't come to see if I was okay. I stayed alone on the cold kitchen floor with my burned skin, my beaten body, my shattered soul. And it was there, in my darkest moment, that something strange happened. I remembered my mother. Not a common memory, no. It was as if she was there with me. I remembered the day she taught me to plant beans in the garden when I was very little. She had said, "Look, Rose, the seed needs to stay in the dark earth, needs to be crushed, needs to almost die. But that's where new life is born." It's from the bottom of the ground that the little plant comes. Could that be it? Could it be that I needed to reach rock bottom to be able to climb up? Could it be that God hadn't abandoned me but was waiting for me to find strength I didn't even know I had? I got up from that floor. I washed my face in cold water. I put ointment on the burn. I put on another blouse. And I made a decision. I was leaving. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I was. I was going to wait for the right moment. I was going to gather strength, and I was leaving. Even if I died trying. In the following days, I began to pay attention to things I had never paid attention to. Where Augustus kept the money. When the boys slept most soundly. Which door creaked less? I began to hide food, a piece of bread here, a banana there, wrapped in a cloth and hidden under the mattress. I began to think about routes. If I left at dawn by the back road, could I get to the village before sunrise? I told Mrs. Eugenia. On a Sunday morning, when the boys had gone fishing and I was helping her peel cassava, I whispered, "Mrs. Eugenia, I'm leaving." She stopped peeling and looked at me with those old, wise eyes. "When?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going. Will you not turn me in?" She held my hand tightly. "I pray every day for you to have the courage to go, child. And when you go, I'll say I didn't see anything, that I woke up and you had disappeared. But be careful. They're dangerous." "I know," I said, "but staying here is more dangerous." Augustus came back the following Sunday. 10 days of travel. He was tired, dirty from the road, with that smell of sweat and cigarette smoke. He entered the house, greeted his sons, and went straight to take a bath. I prepared dinner, country chicken with rice and cornbread, the way he liked it. The table was set, the food was good, everything was right. We ate in silence. After dinner, he went to the porch to smoke. I started washing the dishes. My mind was racing. Can I leave this week, or should I wait a little longer? What if it goes wrong? What if they catch me? I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't hear when he entered the kitchen. I only noticed when he spoke, right behind me. "Rose, the boys said you need correction." I froze. I turned slowly. He was there, leaning against the doorframe, with his arms crossed and that expression I knew so well. I've been trying hard, Augustus. I swear I have." "That's not what they say," he replied. "They say you're talking back, lazy, incompetent." He took a step toward me. "I think I've been too soft with you." And it was at that moment, my dear ones, that I did something I had never done. Something that sealed my fate once and for all. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I can't take it anymore, Augustus. Can't take you anymore. Can't take them anymore. You're killing me a little bit every day." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Augustus stared at me, processing what I had just said. And then, to my surprise, he laughed. But it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was the laugh of someone who had just discovered something very interesting. "Really?" he said, dripping venom. "Then tomorrow, when I leave again, I'm going to Asheville to resolve some business. You're going to have the chance to show the boys how well you endure." He came closer until I could smell his breath on my face. "And when I come back, we'll talk about that loose tongue of yours." He left the kitchen. I stood there, shaking. What had I done? Why had I opened my mouth? Now they were going to be worse. Now. But something inside me had changed. I had told the truth. For the first time in more than 20 years of marriage, I had spoken what I felt. And no matter the price I was going to pay, I had already decided anyway. I was leaving. I was going to wait for him to travel, wait for an opportunity, and leave. I didn't know that the opportunity would come faster than I imagined. I didn't know that Augustus himself was going to hand me, without meaning to, the key to my liberation. And I didn't know that before leaving, I would discover a truth so terrible that it would change everything I thought I knew about that house and that family. On Monday morning, Augustus left for Asheville. He said it would take about 5 days. He had to resolve document issues, sign papers at the notary. When his truck disappeared around the bend in the road, raising that red dust that took a while to settle, I breathed deeply. 5 days. I had 5 days to endure another round of torture with my children, and then I was leaving. I spent that Monday and Tuesday preparing everything. I hid more food. I already had about 3-day-old breads, 2 bananas, a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth. I took an old cloth bag and hid it under the mattress, along with a change of clothes. At night, when everyone was asleep, I'd stay awake planning. I was going to leave at dawn on Saturday. The boys always drank a lot on Friday night, slept late on Saturday. I'd have time to get far before they noticed I had disappeared. Mrs. Eugenia helped me the way she could. On Wednesday morning, she gave me a little money she had saved. It wasn't much. It was 20 old crumpled dollars. But she said, "Take it, my daughter. God knows I wish I could give you more, but it's what I have." I cried, hugging her. "You're the only good person in this house," I said. She squeezed my face with her calloused hands and replied, "You're good too, Miss Rose. Too good for these people. Go and don't look back." The boys during those days were worse than ever. It was as if they knew Dad was going to take longer this time and wanted to take advantage. On Tuesday, they made me kneel on corn. They scattered hard corn kernels on the porch floor and made me kneel there for an hour. My knees bled, turned purple, swollen. On Wednesday, Walden invented that the soup had no salt, threw the plate on the floor, and told me to clean it. With my tongue. My dear ones, I cleaned it. I licked that filthy floor, swallowing humiliation along with dirt and spilled soup, because I knew 3 more days. Just 3 more days, and I'd never have to do this again. Thursday came. I woke up with a strange weight in my chest, a bad feeling I couldn't explain. I prayed more than usual, asked for protection from Our Lady. I made coffee, fed the boys, washed clothes, swept the house. Normal routine. But that weight wouldn't go away. It was noon when it happened. I was in the kitchen, preparing lunch. Cowboy beans with sausage, white rice, sautéed collard greens. Mrs. Eugenia was next to me, cutting the collard greens very thin, the way the boys liked. We were talking quietly about silly things, the weather getting warmer, the persimmon tree that was loaded with fruit. Normal things that made me forget, for a minute, the hell I lived in. The boys were all in the living room. I heard their noise, laughter, loud conversations, someone pushing furniture. They were having their discipline session, as they called it. Only this time, it wasn't with me. It was with Reginald, the youngest, who was 11 and had been caught stealing candy from the pantry. They were teaching him not to steal. I heard the boys crying, the older brothers shouting. My heart bled, but what could I do? If I interfered, they'd be worse with him, and with me too. Suddenly, the noise stopped. Complete silence. I found it strange. I looked at Mrs. Eugenia. She looked at me. "What could it be?" she whispered. I didn't have time to answer. We heard heavy footsteps on the back porch, the one that led straight to the kitchen. Boot steps. Only one person wore boots like that. Augustus. The door opened. He entered the kitchen, sweaty, with clothes dusty from travel, hat in hand. His eyes swept the environment, me, Mrs. Eugenia, the pots on the stove. Then he looked toward the living room, from where the absolute silence still came. My heart raced. A part of me, that part that still had hope, still believed in miracles, thought, "Thank God, he came back. He's going to see what the boys were doing. He's going to see that they're violent, that they hurt me, that this house has become hell. He's going to save me." Augustus walked slowly toward the living room. I dropped the spoon I was using to stir the beans and went after him with wobbly legs. Mrs. Eugenia tried to hold me back. "Don't go, Miss Rose," she whispered hurriedly. But I had already gone. When I got to the living room door, I saw the scene. Reginald huddled in a corner with a swollen eye and bleeding nose. The other 11 sons forming a semicircle, some holding shoes, others holding belts. All frozen, looking at their father with an expression of shock. They had been caught in the act. The silence was so heavy you could hear each person's breathing. I was standing there at the door, holding on to the door frame, waiting for Augustus to explode with anger, waiting for him to yell, "Hit the boys, defend me, defend Reginald, end that madness once and for all." Augustus looked at each son, slowly. Then he looked at Reginald crying in the corner. Then he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made me tremble all over. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't anger at the boys. It was disappointment. Disappointment with them, not with me. He turned to Augustus Jr., the oldest, and said with a low, cold voice that cut my soul like a knife, "I leave for 1 week, and this is all you managed?" It seemed like time stopped. I hadn't understood properly what he meant. Augustus Jr. also seemed confused. "Dad?" Augustus pointed to Reginald. "You're wasting time with a brat? Let the kid learn on his own." He paused, and then looked at me, and what came next destroyed my soul. "Where is she? Where's their mother? Why are you leaving her there in the kitchen, calm, when I left you in charge?" My dear ones, it was at that moment that the ground opened up under my feet. It was at that moment that I understood. It wasn't my children who created the abuse system. It was him, Augustus, my husband, their father. He had taught them. He had ordered them. He had created it all on purpose. "But Dad," Edward tried to explain, "we corrected her yesterday. She's obeying properly." "She's obeying?" Augustus raised his voice for the first time, and everyone cowered. He walked to where I was, pulled me by the arm, dragged me to the middle of the room. I stumbled, tried to balance myself, but he was too strong. He threw me on the floor, there in the middle of that semicircle of children. "Look at her! Look!" The boys looked. I was on my knees on the floor, with my hands resting on the boards, breathing fast, with fear, with pain, with horror. "She's still conscious," Augustus said, and there was contempt in his voice. Pure contempt. "She's still standing, walking, cooking, as if nothing had happened. Do you think this is discipline? Do you think I taught you to go easy?" He turned to Augustus Jr. "You're the oldest. You're responsible when I'm not here, and you're failing. You're letting her boss you around. You're letting her get comfortable." He spat the word comfortable as if it were a curse. I began to tremble, to cry. Not from sadness, from pure horror. Because finally, after all those years, I had understood. My children weren't monsters despite their father. They were monsters because of their father. They weren't rebelling against him. They were obeying him. "Dad, we tried," Walter began. "Tried?" Augustus interrupted. "If you had really tried, she wouldn't be standing here now. She'd be in bed, or better yet, in the hospital." He turned to me, stared at me with hate. "You're enjoying this, aren't you, Rose? You're enjoying seeing my sons fail? You're thinking they're weak, that they won't be able to dominate you? Augustus, please!" I tried to speak, but he cut me off with a shout. "Shut up!" He looked at his sons again. "You'll never be real men if you don't learn this. A woman needs to know her place, and her place is on the ground, serving with fear. If she's not afraid, you're not doing it right." He took the belt from Edgar's waist. "I'm going to show you how it's done, and you're going to learn. Now." My dear ones, what happened in the following minutes I won't describe. Not because I don't remember. I remember every second, every pain, every humiliation, but because some things are too heavy to put into words. What I'll say is that Augustus taught his children while I was there on the floor. He taught where to hit, how to hit, what to say, how to humiliate. It was a class, a torture class. And my children watched, learned, absorbed every word as if it were gospel. When it was over, I could barely move. I stayed there on the floor, waiting to die, waiting for that pain to stop somehow. I heard Augustus's voice, distant, talking to his sons. Now you know. When I travel again, I want you to do exactly this. No going easy, no pity. She needs to understand that here you're the ones who command and that you learned from me. Yes, Dad. I heard the chorus of voices responding. Footsteps walking away, door slamming, silence. I stayed there, alone in the living room, with my whole body aching, but with a clarity in my mind I had never had before. There weren't 16 demons in that house. There were 15 children and one master demon who had created all the others in his image and likeness. I don't know how long I stayed there. It could have been minutes, could have been hours. When I managed to drag myself to the kitchen, Mrs. Eugenia was sitting in the chair, crying. I heard everything, my daughter. I heard everything. She helped me sit, gave me water, cleaned my face with a damp cloth. Mrs. Eugenia, I said, and my voice came out firm despite everything. I'm leaving today, tonight. But you're not in condition. It doesn't matter, I cut her off. If I stay one more day, I'll die. Either they kill me or I kill myself. I'm leaving today. She held my hand. Then I'm going to help you. We spent the rest of the day planning. Augustus had left again. He went to town to resolve something, said he'd be back at night. The boys had gone to take care of the cattle. They'd only be back at the end of the afternoon. It was our chance. Mrs. Eugenia helped me get the bag I had hidden. We put in the food, the change of clothes, the little money. She gave me a few more coins she found saved in an old can. It's not much, but it's what I have. She also gave me a wool blanket. It's going to be cold at night. Cover yourself well. And you? I asked. They're going to blame you. Leave that to me, she said. I'm old. They're not going to do anything to me. And if they do, at least I'll die knowing I saved a life. When the sun began to set and the boys came back from the pasture, I acted normal. I prepared dinner, polenta with meat sauce. I served. They ate, talked among themselves, ignored me. It was as if what had happened in the morning was routine. Normalcy. And for them, it was. After dinner, I did everything I always did. I washed dishes, tidied the kitchen, swept the floor. When I finished, I said goodbye without saying goodbye. Good night, my children. Nobody responded. I went to the room, lay in bed, waited. Midnight. I got up without making noise. I took the bag from under the mattress. I put on my old shoes. I put on a coat over my clothes. I looked at the bed where I had slept for more than 20 years. I looked at the room where I had been violated, humiliated, destroyed, and I whispered, never again. I left through the back door, the one that led straight to the yard. The night was dark, without a moon. Better that way. Nobody would see me. I walked very slowly through the yard, passing by the fruit trees, by the chicken coop, until I reached the back fence. I jumped. Everything hurt, but I jumped. On the other side, the dirt road, the road that led far away. I began to walk, fast. Each step was pain in my beaten body, but it was also freedom. Each meter left behind was one more meter of distance from that hell. I walked, walked, walked. I didn't look back even once. If I looked, I was afraid I'd lose courage. When the sun began to dawn on the horizon, I was already far, about 5-6 miles. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I was going far. Far from Augustus. Far from my children. Far from that cursed farm. I walked until I reached a small village. I don't remember the name. There was a church. I sat on the church steps and cried. I cried everything I hadn't cried in those years. I cried from pain, from relief, from fear, from hope. I cried until I had no more tears. It was there that a lady found me. She was going to open the church for 6 o'clock Mass. She saw me sitting there all bruised with a bag on my back and asked, "My daughter, are you okay? Do you need help?" I looked at her. She was a lady of about 60, short, with a kind face, and I told the truth. I ran away. I ran away from home. I have nowhere to go." She didn't ask anything else. She just said, "Come with me." This lady was named Teresa. She took me to her house, a simple little house with 3 rooms in the village. She gave me food, gave me a bath, gave me a clean bed. And when I told my story, not everything, but enough, she cried with me. "You were very brave, my daughter, very brave." I stayed at Mrs. Teresa's house for 3 months. She hid me, protected me. I learned later that Augustus sent people to look for me. They went to the city, asked everywhere. But nobody knew anything. Nobody turned me in. After 3 months, with Mrs. Teresa's help, I got a job as a domestic worker in a bigger city, even farther away. That's how I started over, from scratch. With the clothes on my back, traumas in my soul, but with something I hadn't had for a long time: freedom. The surprise of that day, Augustus coming back, Augustus showing that everything had been planned by him, wasn't just discovering the truth. It was discovering that even after that horrible truth, I still had strength to choose myself, to choose to live, to choose to leave and never look back again. My dear ones, from the time I ran away until today, 40 years have passed. 40 years of rebuilding, of healing, of learning. It wasn't easy, no. There were days I thought about giving up. There were nights I cried until I fell asleep from exhaustion. But I survived. And more than that, I learned to live again. After those 3 months at Mrs. Teresa's house, I got work as a domestic worker in Nashville. It was a bigger city, farther from Cedar Falls, where I thought nobody would find me. I worked in the house of a good family, Mrs. Marlene and Mr. Gerald. They treated me with respect, paid me properly, gave me a little room in the back to live in. I stayed there 7 years. They were years of hard work, but also of peace. Peace I hadn't known for decades. In 1993, I moved to Memphis to work in the house of a retired couple. I stayed there another 12 years, taking care of them until they passed away. Then I worked in 2 more houses, always as a domestic, always saving every penny I could. I never married again, never wanted to. The idea of sharing life with a man gave me chills. I preferred to stay alone, with my freedom, with my peace. It was only in 2010, when I was already 61, that I decided to return to Cedar Falls. I know it seems crazy, right? Going back to the place where I suffered so much. But you know how it is. We age and miss our homeland. Miss the smell of the air, the way the sun hits the mountains, people talking with that accent I'd known since I was little. And I discovered, through an acquaintance, that Augustus had died in 2008. Heart attack. The children had sold the farm and scattered across America. None of them lived in Cedar Falls anymore, so I came back. I bought a simple little house here in the center of town with the money I had saved all those years of work. It's small, but it's mine. All mine. And here I live my days of peace, finally. I wake up every day early, as I always have, but now it's because I want to, not because someone forces me to. I water my little plants, and how my garden has grown. I have my coffee with cream on the porch. I see the neighbors passing by. I greet everyone. The people here know me as Miss Rose, that quiet lady who lives alone and takes care of the most beautiful flowers on the street. I crochet too. I learned by watching videos on the internet. Yes, this grandma here learned to use the computer. My neighbor's granddaughter taught me. I make little doilies, I make table centerpieces, I make blankets. I sell some at the craft fair we have here every Saturday. It's not to make a lot of money, no. It's more to keep my hands and head busy. And to talk with the other ladies who also sell their little things there. It's nice to have friends, you know? To have people who truly care about you. My routine is simple, and I thank God every day for that. I wake up, take care of the plants, make my coffee. I take a bath, get dressed. I like to get dressed, even when I have nowhere to go. I put on a clean little dress, put on a little lipstick. It's a way of saying, I deserve care, I deserve respect, even if it's just me giving it to myself. In the morning, after coffee, I sit here in my rocking chair and crochet. I have a blanket I've been making for 3 months now. It's big, with colorful flowers, each little square a different color. When I finish it, I'm going to give it as a gift to Mrs. Teresa. She's still alive, still lives in that village. She's already 100 years old, but firm and strong. I visit her every month, take homemade bread, we have coffee together and talk about life. She was my angel on earth, you know. Without her, I wouldn't be here today. In the afternoon, after lunch, which I make just for myself, well prepared, because I learned I deserve good food, I watch my soap opera. I like the 6 o'clock ones, those lighter, more romantic ones. Then I go to the fair when it's Saturday, or I visit some friend, or I just stay here reading magazines, watching television, resting. At night, before sleeping, I pray my rosary. I thank for everything I have, for the little house, for the little plants, for the friends, for my health, which is still good, thank God, despite everything I went through. I thank for having had courage to leave that house. I thank for every day of freedom. I never had contact with my children again. Never wanted to. I know it might seem harsh, but for me, they died that day I discovered the truth. I don't have anger anymore, no. Anger is tiring. Anger makes you sick. But I also don't have desire for reunion, for forgiveness, for those things people think we have to do. I made my peace in my own way, by cutting that past out of my life. But you know what's funny? I have grandchildren now. Not by blood, but by heart. They're the grandchildren of my friends here in the neighborhood. There's little Pete, 5 years old, son of Mrs. Carmen's granddaughter. He calls me Grandma Rose and is always asking for candy. There's little Mary, 7, who loves to stay here at my house watching me crochet. I teach her, help her make the little stitches. There's little Johnny, 3 years old, who calls my house the Flower Grandma's house because he loves to mess with my plants. These children give me a joy I never felt with my own children. Because with them, I can be a real grandmother. A grandmother who gives affection, who tells stories, who makes cookies and lets them lick the bowl. A grandmother who never hits, never yells, never humiliates. A grandmother who protects, who loves, who cares. This is my family now. My friends, my grandchildren of the heart, my little plants, my little house. Is it little? For someone who once had so much, maybe it is. But for someone who had nothing, for someone who lived in hell, this here is paradise. I look out my living room window and see the sunset painting the sky orange and pink. I see children playing in the street. I see neighbors coming back from work. I see life happening out there. And I'm here, sitting in my chair, with my crocheted blanket on my legs, with a cup of lemon balm tea steaming on the side table. I'm at peace. And you know what I've realized in all these years, my dear ones? I realized that the real victory wasn't having run away. The real victory was having learned to live again. It was having looked at that destroyed, broken, hopeless woman and having said, "You deserve good things. You deserve to be happy." And then having fought every single day to make that come true. Today, at 76 years old, I can say with complete certainty, I am happy. Not in the way I dreamed when I was a girl. I don't have a big family. I don't have wealth. I don't have status. But I have something much more valuable. I have myself back. And that, my dear ones, that nobody will ever take from me again. My dear ones, and dear ladies who have accompanied me this far, who have listened to this whole story, I need to say some things that are in my heart. If you're going through something similar to what I went through, if you live in a house where there's no peace, where there's fear, where they hurt you in body or soul, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not alone. And no matter how impossible it seems right now, there is a way out. I know it's difficult. I know it seems like there's nowhere to go, like there's no way to start over, like you don't have strength. I thought all that too. But you know what I discovered? We have more strength than we imagine. We can endure a lot. And when we finally decide we don't want to endure anymore, when we choose our own life, that's when the miracle happens. Not a magic miracle, no. A miracle of courage. A miracle of one step at a time. A miracle of good people who appear along the way to help. I learned in this life that nobody has the right to destroy you. It doesn't matter who it is, husband, son, father, brother, whoever. Nobody has the right to hit you, to humiliate you, to make you feel like you're worth nothing. You are worth something. Worth a lot. Worth everything. I learned that sometimes we need to let go even of those who share our blood, if those people only bring destruction. Family isn't just those born from the same womb. Family is those who care, who respect, who truly love. I lost 15 children, but I gained a family of the heart, and that family saved me. I learned that it's never too late to start over. I was 36 when I ran away. I had my whole body beaten, my self-esteem on the ground, without a penny in my pocket. But I started over. I worked hard, saved money, built a new life. If I could do it, you can too. I learned that life can be good. It can be simple, it can be quiet, but it can be good. It can be a rocking chair on the porch, a cup of hot coffee, a little plant growing in a pot. It can be a child's smile calling you grandma. It can be sleeping at night without fear of waking up getting beaten. It can be freedom. And I learned, mainly, that the most important thing isn't the size of the life we live. It's the quality. It's waking up and knowing you chose that day. It's lying down and knowing nobody hurt you. It's looking in the mirror and recognizing the person who's looking back at you. That's victory. That's overcoming. So my love, if you're suffering, seek help. Look for someone you trust, a friend, a neighbor, someone from church, someone at work. Look for the authorities in your country, the places that exist to protect people who are in situations of violence. In the United States, for example, there are domestic violence hotlines, there are shelters, there are people willing to help. In other countries, too. Research, get informed, and don't be ashamed to ask for help. Those who should be ashamed are those who hit, not those who get hit. And if you know someone who's going through this, don't turn your back. Don't pretend you don't see. Extend your hand. Be the angel that Mrs. Teresa was for me. You can save a life. You can change someone's destiny. And that, my dear ones, is one of the most beautiful things one human being can do for another. I survived. More than that, I won. I conquered fear, I conquered trauma, I conquered pain. And if I won, you can win too. Believe in yourself. Believe you deserve good things. And fight. Fight for yourself, for your life, for your peace. Now, my dear ones, I'm going to make a special request to you who made it to the end of this video. If this story touched your heart, if you think it can help someone, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales and turn on the notification bell. It's important, did you hear? There are so many people suffering in silence, so many people who need to hear that there is a way out, that it's possible to start over. Each subscription, each time you share these videos, is one more person who can be reached, one more life that can be saved. And leave here in the comments one word. Just one word that summarizes what you felt with this story. It can be strength, it can be courage, it can be hope, it can be any word that's in your heart now. I read all the comments, each one of them, and I'm so happy to know this story reached you. Let's create a chain of support, a network of affection and strength for those who need it. Do this now. Don't wait another minute. Someone might urgently need this message, and you could be the instrument to bring hope to that person. And for you who are suffering now while watching this video, I see you. I understand you. I've been where you are, and I'm here on the other side to tell you. It's worth fighting. It's worth surviving. Life can be good again. Believe it. Thank you, my dear ones, for having listened to me this far. Thank you for having opened your hearts to this story so difficult, but also so important. May God bless each one of you. May He bless you with peace, with love, with protection. And may we never forget, we are stronger than we think, and always, always, it's worth choosing life. A kiss in the heart of each one, from Grandma Rose. Until next time, my loves.